1, 2, 3.
While our weekly shows are edited to time for broadcast on public TV and community radio, we offer to our supporting members and podcast subscribers the full uncut conversation. The following is from our monthly Meet the BIPOC Press series. This month we discuss how are artists and activists reframing media narratives for queer and trans liberation. Laura's guests are Qween Jean, a human rights activist, costume designer, and the founder of Black Trans Liberation, and Tourmaline, an artist and the author of Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson. These audio exclusives are made possible thanks to our member supporters.
But when Angela Davis was arrested and arrested by the federal government in New York, all the gay people went down and demonstrated in front of the Women's House of Detention to get Angela Davis out of jail, and we were all in that demonstration for a few days. I mean, in the gay movement, they think we only get into certain gay demonstrations, but it's not true. We get in all kinds of political demonstrations.
Did you ever go to any of the ones in Washington?
I was just in the one in Washington. In fact, I was the one that arranged for free tickets. Free tickets for all poor people that couldn't go to the demonstration.
That was Marsha P. Johnson, activist, artist, fashion icon. You may know her now as a participant in the Stonewall Uprising. You probably wouldn't have heard of her then because of the biases of the time. Indeed, it has taken years for real recognition to come to Marsha P. But today we celebrate the publication of a new biography, Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson, by our guest, Tourmaline. Tourmaline traces Marsha's working-class beginnings with her work with sex workers and sex activists in New York all the way to her death in 1992 in circumstances that are still unclear. Was Marsha P. Johnson central to the Stonewall Rebellion? Absolutely. And also to the liberation movements that exploded after that. She was also, as Tourmaline writes, larger than life. On the stage and in the street, she, quote, offered everyone a clear, resounding answer to the question, what does a greater sense of freedom look like? Her answer was, writes Tourmaline, freedom is me. In these tough times for non-conforming people, we are excited, I am excited, to be joined today by Tourmaline and Qween Jean, who are carrying Marsha's legacy forward today. Tourmaline is a Guggenheim Fellow and Time 100 honoree. Qween Jean, an author, also is a New York City-based costume designer and the founder of Black Trans Liberation, an organization that provides food, groceries, and housing resources to the transgender and non-gender conforming community. What has changed and what hasn't since Marsha P. was on the scene? To this special edition of Meet the BIPOC Press, I welcome Tourmaline and Qween Jean. Welcome both. So glad to have you. I don't know about you, Tourmaline, but if you had tried to time the release of your book to this moment, I don't think you could have timed it more perfectly because it is so much what we need right now, what people need, this story of defiance and joy as you describe it. But you've been working on this for a long time. Why?
You know, I have been blessed to be hot on the heels of Marsha P. Johnson's big spirit for nearly 20 years now. I moved to New York City as a 19-year-old in 2002 and soon made my way to the Christopher Street Piers. I joined this group called Fierce. It was a group that was showing up and showing out for queer, trans, gender nonconforming people of color who were young people making space together on the piers in the West Village against the residents and police desires. And we organized, we protested, we went to community board meetings and, you know, demanded a right to be taking up space. They were trying to pass a curfew back in 2005. And so that was my real early entry into organizing. I later joined Queers for Economic Justice and Sylvia Rivera Law Project as an organizer. But everywhere I went, people were talking about Marsha P. Johnson. And so I was just taking notes. Who was this brilliant freedom dreamer? Who was this profound organizer? And to me, at every step along the way, in terms of my life path, first as a young person, then as an organizer around healthcare and welfare and housing, then in my art career, now in kind of a spiritual place, Marsha's voice has called me along, and it's just been a blessing. So, I've been blessed to receive the message of Marsha P. Johnson, and now in this moment see her full aliveness. I don't think there's a person who better embodies Marsha's legacy than Qween Jean, right? Like literally. And so to me, it's just been a gift to watch the arc of someone's full life, spirit life, continue to get bigger and bigger, and see how my community rendezvous and see with that spirit, and see Qween Jean just be fully alive and knowing, how powerful it is to be holding that torch and making community in the way that she does.
Tourmaline says, Qween Jean, that you describe yourself as a spiritual daughter of Marsha. Is that true?
Correct.
How so?
First of all, I just want to say thank you to you both for this opportunity. It just feels so resonant and deeply, deeply profound. To be able to have this time for reflection and deep inquiry. I also want to just give Tourmaline so much flowers because it's exciting and necessary that this generation and the generations to come have a blueprint, have a gospel to hold on to about her memory, her stories, and the true innovation of Marsha P. Johnson. And so for me, it is a gift to, I moved here in 2012 into New York, also young and trying to figure it out. Ended up at Washington Square Park, like many people do, and never left,
Literally.
And I went to school, I went to NYU, I graduated, and I really, like many people, trying to find purpose, and realized that my purpose was right there. In the summer of 2020, like soon after I graduated, there was the unfortunate unalivings of George Floyd, Tony McDade, Nina Pop. And that summer continued on record. There was over, 52 trans people, Black trans folks that had been killed, Black and brown trans bodies. And that was a record, right? That on record was a trans person a week that had been unalived by transgender violence, gun violence. And so a coalition started, a coalition and a commitment to community, and that was the Stonewall protest. And we met every Thursday. It started at 5, then we'll move to 6, then we'll move to 7. But every Thursday we met on the stoop of the right outside of the Stonewall Inn bar, and we held space. We disrupted, and we demanded equity and justice and freedom for all. And that spirit, honestly, continues today. Today, I don't know when this will be recorded, but as of like a few hours ago, the Supreme Court Justice just ruled that the people in Tennessee, the young people, their healthcare, transgender youth, their healthcare is now banned. And we know that sets a precedence for there's about 22 other states that have been waiting, right, that are in tow to also create a pathline towards destruction. And so we will be outside in the streets in literally just a few hours. So for me, this is ongoing work. This is my mission's work for freedom, collective freedom, and that centers transgender people. We are sacred people, and we deserve as much equity and respect as any other community. And for me, my mission at Black Trans Liberation has started with feeding people, and that has, for me, been a touchstone, but just a grounding place for humanity. Everyone needs a place to sit, to eat, and to be loved on, and to be supported, and to be spiritually fortified. And that is who Marsha P. Johnson at her core was. She fortified the people around her. And the stories about how she galvanized, how she merged unions and merged communities together in the name of freedom. And so that is something that I will continue to live by today as a young Black trans woman who is deeply and committed to solidarity work, towards a liberating world for Black people in this country, immigrants in this country, asylum seekers, Palestinian families, across the board. We recognize that there's attacks on humanity. And so, as Marsha would say, free Palestine, Qween Jean says free Palestine too.
That's right. That's right.
This takes me to your book, Tourmaline, because it comes up so much. This dichotomy in the life of Tourmaline and in just our lives of joy and violence. And I guess insofar as we're in some ways talking about media coverage and the media treatment of this community, my question to you is, how do you balance those two things? I mean, coming into a conversation like this, I framed it as a celebration, and it is. But as you've just pointed out, Qween, as we're speaking, U.S. versus Skermeti has affirmed a Tennessee law that bans affirming care for transgender minors, but more than that, has language about offering any help to minors who live outside of a gender binary, any pharmaceutical or even psychological help to those people. This is a very serious moment in which we find ourselves. Yeah. So how do you balance it, Tourmaline? And how do you suggest the journalists think about that balance?
Well, it's not unprecedented. I was one of the lead organizers of New York State had a provision that specifically denied transgender and nonconforming people health care under Medicaid, and it was repealed in 2014. I was one of the lead organizers who worked around that exclusion for transgender nonconforming people to access healthcare that we know keeps us alive. When we have care that we need, our suicidality goes down, our mental health goes up, and we are able to live full and complete lives. One of the most incredible interviews I heard about Marsha P. Johnson took place in 1971 when she was on hormone replacement therapy, and she is reveling. You can hear the gender euphoria in her voice as she describes her body changing in beautiful, blossoming ways. You can hear how alive she is. And so we have been here before, just like in New York State that denied transgender nonconforming people access to the healthcare we need. We're seeing it happen in Tennessee. We're seeing it happen in other states. We're seeing the Supreme Court ruling. One page that I take from Marsha's book, though, is that she was in a moment navigating extremely harsh conditions. She wasn't putting a happy face sticker over any of them, but she was looking for relief. And so she moved when she was 18 to Times Square in 1963, when you would be arrested and put in jail as a trans or gender nonconforming person, just going outside and living your truth. What she did was she rented these hourly hotels with her sister, a 13-year-old Sylvia Rivera. Just think about how young some of these people were, right? That were hustling in Times Square because they weren't safe at home. So she rented these hourly hotels, and they would call them hot spring hotels because of whether it was winter, spring, summer, or fall. If you've been in New York in a pre-war building, you can't crack a window and the heat is boiling, but it did provide safety and sanctuary from the realities on the street. And what did they do in those rooms? They dreamed. There's a beautiful interview with Stephen Watson, a Village Voice journalist who talked to both Sylvia and Marsha in 1979, and they both talked about how they used that space to dream beyond what is, to see the harsh conditions for what they were, but to imagine, well, what would it be like to go outside and feel safe, to know our value, to not be harassed, to live in our power. And a beautiful way to move from a place of fear because of harsh conditions and to go to a place of more empowerment is relief. Having that space with community, it reminds you, what are you fighting for? We're fighting for our joy. We're fighting for our connection. We're fighting for our care. Stonewall was an uprising, right? It was a way that people went from a feeling of powerless to a feeling of more empowered because of rage and righteous anger. That's a really important way to get back to joy. But I keep coming back to joy too, because Marsha knew that these conditions didn't get to determine how she felt about herself. No court, no Supreme Court, no police officer, no governor, no president gets to determine how we feel about ourselves. And so she was creating the conditions to remind herself and each other that we too get to feel beautiful and know our value firmly.
Qween, how does Marsha's work show up in your work today? She worked on housing, she worked on AIDS, she worked on no end of issues, including policing, as you do.
Yes, there is a deep through line of, I would say, alignment, right? And uh, of care, of humanity. And I think to me, to this day, there's a lot of synergy around, as you were saying, around housing justice, sovereignty, and ensuring that people have a place to eat, a place to actually have a safe space, right, to feel human and loved on, in a way that a lot of resources and organizations, they offer 9 to 5, walk in, but there's not actually a designated space for fellowship, and that's what my organization has been committed to. We think about immigration. We think about, of course, the unfortunate ongoing crisis of police brutality, police violence, in a way that I myself has been, a survivor of that. But it doesn't stop me. And something that, my, mother Cecilia Gentili Emo, she's there to remind me that the system will do anything in its power, to stop you, but they can't break you, right? And so, and in the way that Marsha was a survivor of many acts of violence, I believe she still had a bullet in her body from a previous encounter of violence, but still fought and was still glamorous and still said, "I am alive and I will fight." And I will provide. And so that is something too that I think that is unlike a lot of other leaders that we read about, a lot of other feminists that we have read about historically, who have earned their flowers and who've been merited in that way. But Marsha P. Johnson was a provider, alongside her sisters and her entire siblings who resisted oppression, who resisted fascism, who resisted totalitarianism. That tells you queerness belongs here for a certain time, Blackness belongs in this other portion for a certain amount of time. In a way that we see the same fascist ideology being implemented today in 2025, right? That there is the LGB without the T. Yeah. And so as she would have been in the streets, baby, I am pumping right behind her and in her glory, with the full conviction that I know that our truth is real, we exist, and we deserve to have a humanity, and our expression be honored. And that includes trans healthcare that is being waged, and they are waging terror. But what we will wage back is power.
That's right.
Hi, it's Sarah, the development director at Laura Flanders and Friends. I wanted to let you know that a few times a year, Laura hosts an online conversation just for donors. It's a chance to connect, ask questions, and hear what's coming up behind the scenes. Our next one is on July 16th, and I'd love for you to be there. If you make a one-off or monthly donation of any size by July 15th, you'll get an invite. Go to lauraflanders.org/donate. That link is also in the podcast description. We're proud to be 100% ad-free and totally donor-supported. So every contribution truly keeps us going. Hope you'll consider joining us.
And a reminder to hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you. Now back to our full uncut conversation.
So you mentioned Sister Gentili, another leading longtime activist who passed away, I think, last year, big loss to the community. You've talked to so many veterans in this community, Tourmaline, in order to piece together all these new, or not new, but all these additional aspects of the Marsha P. Johnson story that weren't well known. And I have to remind people, in that very initial reporting on the Stonewall Uprising, I think it was the New York Times that ran the headline, 4 policemen hurt in a village raid. And the only others who were mentioned were men. You didn't hear the women, you didn't hear the non-binary people, you certainly didn't hear about the drag queens, the transvestites, or the trans folks like Marsha P. What did you find in your research was lying there as a surprise even for you? And then I guess my question for all of us is, what's changed and what hasn't in the coverage of our community, in the sense that what Qween has just said is that silos remain in our reporting, that silos, which to my mind mean we're not getting a full story, we're not getting good reporting on so many of these critical issues. But in terms of the reporting of Stonewall itself and of Marsha herself, where did you find surprises?
Well, I think to me, it's so important to remind anyone having a conversation about Stonewall that Marsha was there. And also there were street queens and street kids in the park who were firmly part of the uprising, right? And also Stonewall was a segregated bar. They used to have the backroom bar. David Carter wrote a long text about Stonewall and mentions Marsha, in the footnote by name, saying it's almost undoubtable that Marsha was among the first to start the Stonewall Uprising. And yet, because of ableism, people didn't want to, and anti-Black racism and transphobia, people didn't want to credit Marsha with being instrumental in the uprising. And so to me, my research was profound. I was able to interview and also read about first encounters of many, many people who saw Marsha taking part in the Stonewall Uprising. I also write about, this quote where Marsha is talking to the journalist, really wonderful journalist, Eric Marcus, about not getting there till 2 a.m. And that's something that people talk about a lot. That quote actually has a deeper context, because in that same conversation, Marsha is saying, I didn't get there till 2 a.m. because Stonewall was on my birthday in August. Marsha was a Virgo. And she was saying they moved the date. She also said the same thing in an interview in 1988 in the One Archive. She said, Stonewall was in August. I'm not sure why they moved the date. So what I talk about in the Stonewall chapter is how Stonewall, like other riots, aren't neuronormative events, right? My dear friend Leah Lakshmi pens a really beautiful essay about disability justice and how it intersects with Stonewall and Marsha. And she says really firmly, we need to love our mad queens, right? Trauma affects how we remember. I think, most of us understand that Stonewall was in June. Why might then Marsha in the same moment say Stonewall's happening in August on her birthday? Well, she was living with a bullet in her back for 11 years. She had been navigating so much violence throughout her life. She was giving that interview during the early emergence of the HIV/AIDS crisis, in which so much loss and grief was shaping her experience. She was also a not neurotypical person. She had multiple psychiatric disabilities. And so I think it's really important to foreground how our recollections are shaped by trauma, and also how many people just saw Marsha there, right? How the primary historian of Stonewall, David Carter, writes about Marsha being there, and then also to understand it really firmly through a disability justice lens. These are not sane events, they're maddening events, and we need to make sure we are building a movement that encompasses all of our community, especially disabled, trans, people of color, who are at the forefront of liberation. And so to me, the Stonewall chapter really goes into all of the lore, and I really break it down. But the takeaway that I have is Marsha was, could recall the exact songs playing in the Stonewall's backroom bar. Marvin Gaye heard it through the grapevine. She said it again and again and again throughout her life. I think that's a really beautiful thing. I love the contradictions and the messiness where she can have complete recall but the song, and then also say Stonewall's taking place in August. And I think it's really beautiful. And the lesson is love our mad queens. We need to embrace disability justice in our movements.
You can find several interviews with Leah Lakshmi Piepzna Samarasinghe in our archives.
I know.
Watching and listening. Yeah. And she has beautiful things to say about this. And I have to say, we certainly have to acknowledge that the New York Times, which claims to be that all the news that's fit to print, did not get that story right. So when we're talking about accuracy, we hold some people to different standards than others. I'm coming to you though, Qween. What about that question about what's changed and what hasn't in our reporting? You mentioned earlier we have the kind of housing story over here, and then we have the LGBTQ story over there, or maybe we don't have it at all. Are we doing any better, we in the media world, the storytelling world, of integrating our understanding of who is on the cutting edge, who is on the front line?
This is this question really resonates with me, as we are 6 months into a new administration that is actively pursued to discredit, delegitimize media, news sources as frivolous, as biased, while this is coming from a bigoted tyrant. And so, in a way, people now resort to YouTube, to theologians, to different personalities who are giving them news, right? And so we discredited actual experiences for gossip, and so we see that because of that, trans people are caught in this crossfire of misinformation, disinformation, and true hatred, and a disdain for our existence, our contributions, and our overall wellness to date. And so for me, I feel, and the best way that I can really contextualize is that, yes, there has been great advances, right? People like to say, we're in an era of progress, but progress has solely rested on the shoulders of those that are not Black, those that are not fat, those that are not brown. I mean, there's a homogenous community that has benefited from progress. Same gender loving folks, right? They refer to this in that time, that era, same gender loving people were able to get their marriage rights approved. But yet in 2025, now we're banning trans and queer youth from being able to go see a doctor,
That's right.
from being able to go sit in front of a psychiatrist
That's right.
and explain the changes that they're going
That's
through.
right.
So yes, so the buck has been passed, and that's where it's at. And so we as trans community, outsiders, immigrants, children of the corn, right? We are still picking up the mantle. We are still Sisyphus in terms of function, as we are rolling up this hurdle, this burden up this hill, while the people on the LGB bus literally are driving past us.
Mm.
Right. And they told us, we'll come back and get you. So those are the contexts that we existed in this moment. And so, yes, there is a call for justice. But in terms of the media has not really been a facilitator or a conduit really for action. Right. It lists people as othered. Right. And so, yeah, the trans people, they have their fight going on. And that's it, right? It just so we are contextualized as outsiders and not actual woven in fabric weavers of this community.
It does seem historically true and repetitive that in moments of crisis, people shrink their population, shrink their group identity, thinking that maybe they can protect themselves if they get smaller. So we'll just worry about people here. We'll just worry about people like us. We'll just get our laws in place, everything you've just described. What does the story of Marsha tell us about that as a strategy, particularly in a moment right now where there are a lot of people? We just saw Pete Buttigieg take his pronouns out of his resume and start. And we've seen Gavin Newsom kind of running away from trans rights in sports. This is a moment where we are in a very frightening time for a lot of people, and perhaps they too are feeling a tendency to just shrink a bit.
Yeah, I mean,
like a snail.
Yeah, I mean, like, I was just gonna quickly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Qween. Yes.
Yeah, I'll just quickly respond and say that Marsha was fighting for gay rights, right? And for Marsha, that included every human under the sun, right? Whether this was your first day as gay, or honey, you are a veteran, elder statesperson, gay, right? Gay rights. And we see today, we have normal gays who openly call themselves normal gays, who feel as if, no, we have to align ourselves and assimilate with heteronormativity in order for us to have a semblance of freedom, of success, of financial acumen. And so these are the issues that we have, is that, yes, what Marsha was fighting for, what Sylvia got up there on that stage in Washington Square Park and said, enough is enough, right? You will not skip us and look over us in this moment. She has had her nose broken. She's been kicked out of her apartment, as many trans leaders have had. We have sacrificed. We will give up our rent money so another person doesn't have to sleep outside, because we know what the shelter system does to people. And so those are the very things that we're fighting for. We make sacrifices for people who will then still leave us at the bus stop and promise to come back and get us. And so Marsha P. Johnson, Pay It No Mind, said, no, we are fighting for inclusion in a way that there is no semblance of difference. There's no line in the sand. Tourmaline.
Anything you would add to that, Tourmaline?
I can't. That was perfect. What a great way to,
So as we draw to a close, I want to hear from you, Tourmaline, also to the big audience out there. You described beautifully a scene where people come off the bus at Port Authority or Times Square and they see an invitation to a certain kind of freedom. All sorts of people in seeing Marsha P. Johnson saw an invitation to a certain kind of freedom. And I guess my question to you in all of this is, A, what's changed you in doing this research about Marsha and producing this book? And B, what are you seeing as her invitation to others who might not think that they're part of this community?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing is you can't get small enough to make an insecure population feel stable, right? You can't shrink your life to make anyone who is looking for the reason why they are in a hard situation feel better. It's just not going to happen. And so Marsha's lesson is actually what we need to do. The thing that gets us to the solution side of the wave rather than the problem side of the wave is be fully alive, right? Turn the volume up on our lives. And Marsha's life was an invitation to do that. Like I said before, she wasn't slapping happy face stickers on the harsh conditions. She was using those as launching pads to dream beyond what is and ought to, and into what ought to be. Qween Jean was at NYU. Marsha took over NYU, right? There's a real powerful connection between Marsha P. Johnson and Qween Jean. Marsha was in the basement of the Student Center in Occupation in September of 1970, dreaming up a world where there was literally free childcare alongside free tuition for universities, alongside gender-affirming care, alongside not being held in places of incarceration. And so Marsha's freedom dreaming message is profound and so relevant. She's an architect of a movement that's never been more alive. But all of that starts with our determination to turn up the volume of our life and be all of who we are, right? To revel in that. When I talk about joy, I like to remind myself there's no hierarchy, right? It's not better emotion to feel joy and a worse emotion to feel anger or despair. It's all part of the path. And so, just like when you're in a place of fear, an easy place to get relief is righteous indignation and anger and coming together in the midst of a mess of a thing. Marsha knew she had the best clarity in her joy. She had the greatest access to resources to change a problem into a solution in her clarity and in her joy. And so she did that throughout her life. And I think that's an open invitation for all of us to be reveling in what we're defending. What are we fighting for? What is this community about? And I'm so excited to be here and talking to the legendary Qween Jean, who is day by day by day by day embodying that legacy.
Is it true you have Marsha's face on your shoulder, Tourmaline?
Yeah, on my heart. I'm sorry. Right here.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
We're at time. We could continue this conversation, and I hope that we will, but we are at time. And I need to ask you both the question that I ask all of our guests at the end of our episodes, which is, what do you think is the story the future will tell of this moment? And we'll start with you, Tourmaline. I know you've got to go. Let me start with you, Tourmaline. What's the story you think is what is the story that you think the future will tell of us now?
I think that the future will tell that we found ourselves yet again in the midst of a mess of a thing with undeniably harsh conditions, and yet we tuned to our profound knowing that we can turn out a problem into a solution by coming together and reveling with each other, by moving in clarity, by getting the solutions together, and by demanding the world understand that we're powerful people, we're beautiful people, and we deserve to be fully alive.
25 years hence, 50 years, you take your pick. What do you think is the story the future will tell of today?
The future will say that there was a uprising, a resurgence of people who said that they will no longer have to audition for empathy, and that society will respect by any means necessary. And that means that we will demonstrate, we will agitate, we will educate, and we will organize so that we have what we need to survive. And as a people, we will have done it in the past. Our ancestors have done it, and we will continue to model that forward, because what I know to be true is that I desire to have freedom and liberation in this lifetime. I would love to breathe an air, right? I can smell the aroma of liberation, and I smell it and I feel it every time I'm with my community, I'm with my people. We are truly in deep, deep joy, right? As Tourmaline has beautifully, powerfully articulated, we are in this place where we feel so powerful and unstoppable. And that is what I believe this future, oh my God, the people are calling me now, it's time to go. But that is what I believe, that I hope that people will say about this moment in particular.
So if you have another 2 seconds, Qween Jean, I wanted to ask you a specific question about immigration and ICE raids, because I feel I'm hearing nothing. This is one of those subjects where our reporting has become very siloed. In terms of the immigration raids that are happening with such audacity right now, where do trans people stand? Where's your community feeling this? And are you able to track what is really going on? Qween Jean.
Yeah, this question, it comes at a great time. There is little information that is being really shared, the truth. Ultimately, we know that a lot of trans and queer people, especially here in New York City, that are asylum seekers, that have had to leave other countries from persecution, now find themselves in a place of purgatory. We have community members, trans and queer folks, that are afraid to leave their homes, that are afraid to have gone to work. They can't even go to get a hormone shot because they're afraid. What if ICE is literally outside waiting for us? People are terrified to go to their court gates because of what footage that has been released. Yesterday, Brad Lander, a duly elected city leader, was tackled and violated by ICE agents because he was questioning if they could present a warrant before they took away his constituent. He was holding on to his constituent, right, to bear witness to the process. And so these are the things that our LGBTQI community members who are in this very, very vulnerable place have no line of support. Because ultimately they are already targeted, right? Because we're targeted for our existence. But literally in this moment, people are terrified to leave their homes. And the lawyers, and we understand that there is sanctuary status in New York City, but the powers that be, unfortunately, the current administration, I'll say that, they have ushered in and opened the door for ICE agents and the Homeland Security to desecrate and to attack anyone that they deem will help to build their 3,000 weekly arrest quota.
We mentioned the Scarametti case at the beginning of this conversation, and that was a case brought by Tennessee parents.
What?
Parents of trans kids who have now been deemed unworthy of care and denied that care in Tennessee. This is a Supreme Court precedent now that people will be feeling all across the country. What's your advice to those folks, not just in Tennessee, but in this country as a whole, who care, who have trans members in their family, who may be trans themselves, who want to know what they can do?
I've been thinking about this all morning. And just in about an hour, we'll be taking to the streets with our community in solidarity with the families in Tennessee, but mostly and concurrently to help send a message to everyone in this nation that the system will try and in this moment have aimed to delegitimize an entire group of people. And if we cannot recognize that this is a pipeline towards destruction, we have seen this happen in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, right? Where we identify a group of people as unfit, unworthy. So it feels like there is a precursor, this moment in particular, that trans people will be again villainized. It started with the drag ban a few years back, then moved to restroom bans and attacks, then towards transgender athletes, right? And banning them and attacking them and their presence from truly being able to participate in the thing that they do, right? Which is athletics and sports. And so we know that this attack on healthcare is truly a way for them to deny healthcare for all transgender people in this country. And we have seen it happen before in the past, and it feels deeply heartbreaking that we are witnessing this happen again. And so we're urging people to not fold, to not comply, and to resist, and to stand up for your neighbors. Because I say this all the time, if young youth with cancer were denied health care, there would be an uprising. And so transgender youth also need that same amount of care and that same autonomy, because this is life affirming, and that is what is at stake. And so my heart goes out to these parents who have said that we will show up for our kids. We will litigate for our children, because we know that we have to answer to them at the end of the day. And so that's what's at stake.
Do you think that there is a potential for alliance building in this moment? I think of it just as you mentioned, denying kids care to kids with cancer. It's like we are seeing the cancellation of contracts to research on cancer for kids. Is there an alliance brewing, perhaps, around this question of denial of health care by this government?
Absolutely. I mean, there has been alliance when we think about different groups, of different minority groups that have, unfortunately been targeted in the same way as well.
Not to mention women and reproductive care. Our friend Amara Jones will always talk about that continuum.
And it's so connected. And so we also had to connect the dots, that this is a way to isolate and to create silos. And the way I loved when you were saying that earlier today about that, how that we recognize that when there are silos in community, the coverage is inconsistent. And so therefore they are able to control a narrative of hatred, of bigotry, and that this is the that we identify or target people as the enemy from within. Right. And so transgender people will not be the new target. And it feels as if we are watching a fascism be emboldened, be bloated. It's now overly funded, and it is so grotesque. And so, yes, there is a call for unification, for humanity, but also there's now allegiance to our people, right? We have to make allegiance and alliance for the rest of the people that are still coming behind us in this moment. And it has to be now. And it's not by accident that this happens during Pride, right? So we will not be distracted, right? I think so. And so it's to say that, right? That these are intentional ways to deviate. No, everyone should just be joyful as we are, taking away and commodifying the very things that people need to. Wow.
And at the same time, we need to embrace our joy and our pride. So it is a very Zen reality that we are living in.
Yes, and two things will exist always at the same time. Yes. Joy.
Thank you so much.
It's an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to the full conversation from this month's Meet the BIPOC Press. You'll find more information in the podcast description, including a link to the full episode notes posted at patreon.com/Laura Flanders and Friends. These audio exclusives are made possible thanks to our member supporters. Please join our members now by making a one-time donation or make it monthly. All the details are at lauraflanders.org/donate. And thanks again to all our member supporters.